Welcome to noise11.com, the Alice Cooper Band. We've got Neil, Dennis, and Michael, the trifecta. I am very impressed. Welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Hey, Paul.
Happy to be here, Paul.
Now, we've had Alice Cooper down in Australia a lot. We've never had the Alice Cooper Band. So by the end of this interview, I want to hear some positive 2026. We want to be there type stuff. So let's see how we go.
Well, it's on my bucket list. I want to throw some shrimp on the Barbie.
You know, we don't say shrimp down here. We call them prawns. So you're going to have to learn the local
better
lingo.
Better yet, prawns are bigger than shrimp.
And some really big bottles of Foster beer.
Well, and that's it. That's the other irony. We don't have that down here either.
Well,
what do you have?
It's like whatever you would recommend, Paul. I'm in for it.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, I think what has happened is that America has been given the advertising version of Australia.
Yeah, that's right. That's all we want to know.
That's all you want to know. Okay, yeah.
We don't want to know the facts.
No. It's all Crocodile Dundee and Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah, that's all we need. And AC/DC, don't forget that.
Oh, AC/DC, of course, yes. Now, we've got the Revenge of Alice Cooper album, which is very exciting news. There were hints that there could have been something to come, with Paranormal and Detroit Stories and something like that. At what point was it decided that we're going to make our first album since Muscle of Love?
Well, we actually had a guillotine with a really sharp blade, and we had Alice's head in there, and this wasn't a trick one. This was right from Paris, France. They took it out of an antique museum. We were going to cut his freaking head off if we didn't get a record deal together with Bob Ezrin. So he said, yes. And the rest now is history. It's as simple as that, Paul.
The songwriting, Alice, Bob, and of course you guys. So how does it work in the room? Was it old school like what you did 50 years ago with the songwriting?
It was, except for technology has come a long way. So we didn't necessarily have to re-record a song if somebody came up with the idea for a variation on the arrangement. We could do some of the arranging post-recording. But it was pretty much exactly the same. I mean, Bob Ezrin had his kind of cheerleader energy going, and everybody was throwing out ideas, and everybody was joking around, and it was very much like it always has been.
It's always a chemistry, Paul, between the band. We all bring songs to the table, Michael, Dennis, and I. Alice had some songs on this one as well, and then we all work on them as a group. Like Dennis said, it's a total 100% collaboration. Bob comes in with some great arranging ideas, and a couple of songs and we're all together in the studio at the same time. This wasn't done, none of the recordings that we've done, because I've heard some rumors that we weren't in the studio for Welcome to My Nightmare sequel, Paranormal, and Detroit Stories. We were in the studio all the time together for those songs that we did on Alice's solo albums, and the same thing here, because that's where the chemistry happens. That's where we can look at each other. We're goofing around. We're having a great time, still like the old, and that's never changed. That's what's kept our friendship and sense of humor is what's kept the band together, as friends for years.
Well, not only have we got the original lineup here, but it's very, very nice to see that Glen Buxton is also included. Glen, who passed away in 1997, and part of his guitar work appears on one of the tracks, "What Happened to You." So tell me about that song. Did you have Glen's piece and then build the song around that? How did it work?
That's exactly what happened. I had a cassette tape that Glen and I did a late night jam at the Gillespie Estate, where the band lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, 1973. And he had this riff, he called it Astute Lobotomy. And that's all he had, this angry riff and a name. And I had this all these years, but I told Bob Ezrin that I had it. And with today's technology, you could clean it up. And then they put a click track to it. And Michael, Neil, and I, and Alice, and Bob Ezrin right in the studio, wrote a song that went with that riff. And Glen's riff is on the recording, and he gets a writer's credit.
So how muddy was the original recording then? What you're saying reminds me of what the Beatles did with the Now and Then recording a couple of years ago with John Lennon.
Yeah, except this was an angry riff. And when you talk about it sounding muddy, it didn't sound any muddier than Glen preferred his sound to be. So it sounds angry, and that's Glen's delivery was always the fire of the band, and it was like a lot of time Michael would have his clean cutting through tones. Even when he had distortion, Michael's riffs would always cut through everything. But Glen was more like the angry hornet.
Yeah. What was it recorded on? Was it a cassette recording?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was it. Cassette machine.
Let's talk a bit about Bob Ezrin then, because Bob joined you guys for Love It to Death, which was actually the third album. Looking back at Bob's career, that must have been the very start of Bob's career. You and he started, you were a couple of albums ahead of him, actually.
Yeah, that was his first album Bob ever worked on. But Jack Richardson was the head producer on it, and Bob Ezrin was the new kid at Nimbus 9 in Toronto. And he was the one that was sent down to New York, Max's Kansas City to see our live show, to see whether Nimbus 9 had any interest in recording the band. And Jack Richardson wasn't so hot on the idea of the band. We had a pretty bad reputation, as we always have had. And he didn't want to have anything to do with this. And he sent Bob down to Max's Kansas City, New York City, and around September, summer of 1970, and thought that Bob would come running back to Toronto scared as hell and didn't want to have anything to do with the band. Bob loved us. He actually became like the sixth member of the band. And so Jack said, okay, you like the band, and go down and start working with them. And that's what led to it. So this was our third album. That was Bob's first album. And he went through an ordeal of fire and sarcasm, and trying to come into the inner circle of our band was not an easy thing for anybody to do. But he survived, and he had an element in his arranging and his love of classical music and knowledge of classical music that really added to what we were trying to do for the darker side of our music and for the more pop side of our music too.
So working with Bob after working with Frank Zappa on the first record, which must have been an interesting recording session, and then David Briggs, who went on to work with Neil Young after you guys on the second album, was Bob a more structured producer?
Bob was a better fit. I mean, David Briggs didn't like us. He had already worked with Neil Young and Crazy Horse. And, back in those days in LA, it was the hippies and the freaks. Well, we leaned more towards the freaks, even though we made fun of everybody. But David Briggs didn't like us. Frank Zappa liked us, but a good fit. As brilliant as he linked as us.
With the new album, I love the innuendo in the new album, as there is always when you go back and listen to some of the old lyrics. Up all night. I'm lucky to be up for 5 minutes a month. How do you guys do it?
It's a secret.
Up all night, Viagra.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but there's some great lyrics on the album. You obviously had a lot of fun with the innuendo and getting in the studio and writing these things. I'm seeing big smiles on the faces probably around the table as you're creating these songs.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, it's work, and we all have our own thing to do, and we all know what the other guy's going to do. And, we've not only worked together, but we spent many years in the same hotel room and the same station wagon and all that. But as far as working on a song, we know what we want to do, and everybody throws out all kinds of ideas because we want every part of every song to be as good as possible. So Michael brings in like Black Mamba was, Michael had a great guitar riff, and him and Neal had jammed on it, and so that just kind of came together really fast in the studio.
The album itself, in sound-wise, harks back to some of the early albums. Kill the Flies, Halo of Flies. There's a connection with the two there, the present and the past marries up. Was that a deliberate attempt to sort of remind us of how great this band was back in the day?
I think a lot of it, Paul, is that it's the way we write. When we write, we're not really thinking about the past or the future. It's just we're in the moment when we write a song. Alice, Dennis is talking about our jobs that we do. Dennis comes up with his own great bass lines, and Michael his riffs and guitar parts, and me on the drums. Alice's job is to take a song that one of us writes or he writes, and he always has the last say in his lyrics. He's the one singing them, so he has to have something that he feels comfortable with, and we're all pretty much that. Think about that in respective to our own instruments, and that's Alice's job. And sometimes he leaves the lyrics 100% alone, and sometimes leaves them as they are, and sometimes he'll elaborate on them. So sometimes on some of the songs, until we hear the final mixes, we're not really sure what Alice, how he changed the lyrics or what he did, or he's totally rewritten a song. Again, that's his job. That's what he does. And Bob even comes in, helps with lyrics, but we all write lyrics, and believe me, it's the chemistry, it's the fun. We probably wouldn't do it if it was work. We wouldn't take it very seriously as professionals. But to get together in the same room after all the years we've known each other and have a great time, that's when the magic happens. And Bob, puts it on, records it with the technology of today. And I think we're all, Michael and Dennis and I, all just totally blown away about how great this album sounds with Bob at the helm in the control room and with the mixing and the mastering. It's the best sounding album I think we've ever done.
The drums are louder than usual, for one thing, which I like.
Who came up with the title "Crap That Gets in the Way of Your Dreams"?
That's an Alice song. That's an Alice song. When I got a house, I live in New England, and in the winter of 2015, too much snow, so I retired from the real estate business, went out to Arizona, bought a house, and lived there the first, that was in the summer, too hot to be there, so it was a winter home. I went out there so I could play golf, which I love to do, and be close to Michael and Alice. And, when I was out there, we get together, write some songs. And that was Crap That Gets in the Way of Your Dreams was one of Alice's songs. And it had stuck around. On Detroit Stories, Social Debris was another song that came from that session. Money Screams on this album came from that session, and Intergalactic Vagabond Blues came from that session too. Michael and Alice and I wrote those together. So yeah, that song was still pretty much in the spirit and the lyrics that Alice wrote them in.
There's another song on there, What a Sid, which sort of has, am I pronouncing that correct?
Yeah, you got it.
As in SYD, like as in Sydney. So I just went with the Sid. Yeah.
Right.
But what a Sid has sort of an ending to it that sort of reminds me of Gutter Cats. Is that deliberate?
The thing, I've had several people point out different songs that they think is a deliberate reference to something that we did before. But like Neal said, that's just how we write. And that's not intentional. It's just the way that the song was written.
Money Screams has a deliberate reference at the end of it with
$1 Billion Babies.
Not that album.
Yeah,
I got the wrong
right
album
there.
out. $1 Billion Babies.
You're right there. You're right there. Yeah, $1 Billion Babies. But the one at the end of What a Sid, let's see, what's the reference? Is it lyrical?
I thought it was Gutter Cats, just the
like
sounding of the tempo, Gutter Cats off School's Out.
Yeah, well, Dennis wrote both of those songs, Gutter Cat and What is Sid? He wrote the
Yeah,
music.
so I wrote both of the songs, so that's the similarity. But actually, What is Sid originally was Green Grotto, which was written as a sequel to Blue Turk. And then Alice changed the lyrics to be about Glen Buxton. Somebody said that I had something on Wild Ones that sounded like Gutter Cat. So I don't know. I don't see it, but I'll listen again and see if I can hear the connection.
But Paul,
It wasn't intentional.
let me elaborate one more thing. What is Sid? It's not about Sid Barrett or Sydney, Australia, although that's pretty cool. But Glenn would call someone that was like a real clumsy oaf, or just not really cool, a Sid, for some reason. It seems to go, oh, that guy, I don't want to hang out with him. He's a real Sid. So that's the reference to the title. And Glenn had been saying that ever since I've known him, and I'm sure ever since Dennis and Michael knew Glenn.
When you mentioned Blue Turk in there, like Blue Turk off the School's Out album was actually a song that got played a hell of a lot on radio station 2SM in Sydney when it first came out. Cool. So if we get you down here, that song is going to be part of the set list. Alice never plays it when he comes in.
Yeah, that's a great song.
That's the perfect example of how versatile Glen Buxton was, because Michael's playing keyboard on that and the only guitar is Glenn. And he was so on the same wavelength as those New York City horn players that that was recorded at the same time. The horn players were warming up and Glenn was going to lay down his track and they started jamming. And then Bob Ezrin said, hey, let's just record everything right now live with these guys.
The track Wild One, which you mentioned before, a nod to Marlon Brando, obviously.
Yeah, nod to Marlon Brando, and also because I was thinking that, bikers had Born to Be Wild. They need more songs about bikes than that.
Of course. When the physical album of The Revenge of Alice Cooper comes out, are we going to see great packaging like we did with this? The old Muscle of Love that came in the box, and we had the... we had the Schools Out with the ladies' knickers inside, and of course, $1 Billion Babies with its
got them all,
$1 bill or $1 billion bill. So, what do we got there? We're having a look at the unveiling of the album.
Well, sort of. Let's see. You can see. Yeah, you can see. Oh, there's me. Mr. Smith.
Smith goes to Washington.
And then you've got yellow vinyl. Hello. There's Michael with his lobster claw.
It's crabs. I got the crab.
Crab claw. He's had the crabs more than once. And Alice with the switchblade, which actually is, I think, somewhat of a tribute to Glen Buxton. So you get all of that, and you get so many notes, liner notes and everything. And look at that, yellow vinyl. Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Look out, everybody.
Yeah, no knickers around it, though.
No knickers.
Now we could put a absorbent diaper on there, like for men who in their elder years have problems.
Yeah, well,
I don't think we need to know about that. We don't need the Depends around the vinyl.
Oh boy, and a Viagra.
Yeah. So touring plans for this band. Are there touring plans for this band?
Well, I don't know. We haven't heard any at this point, but we'd love to come to Australia and play.
Mm.
Yeah, we did. When we played the shows in 2017 in the UK, we played 5 shows with Alice's touring band. They went on for about the last half hour, 35, 40 minutes. And, that again just came up out of, pretty much nowhere. We're always ready to go. We've been wanting to play forever, wanted to do the album forever. and it finally came together. And so, like Dennis said, there's no concrete plans, but if if it comes down to it, however it would be organized or whatever, would be happy to do it for sure.
Because I think the first time I ever saw Alice live, you guys had already split. There was no Alice Cooper band as we're seeing here. It would have been 75, 76. I would have been probably 16, 17 years old. It would have been off the back of Goes to Hell, and Welcome to My Nightmare had just been released as well, but he didn't do anything off that. What did you actually think of this album when it came out?
It's hard for me personally. It's hard for me to listen to those albums without thinking about what I would have done on it.
Good point.
Yeah, fair enough.
So that album, Go to Hell, Alice Cooper, Go to Hell. That picture is actually the Alice's face on the inside of the $1 Billion Baby album cover on the when we're sitting there with all the money and the baby. That's the same exact picture that was used on that album cover. So I don't know. I never got paid for it, but I'm still waiting for a check. I'm sure Dennis and Michael are too, because we paid for that session.
Glenn paid himself.
Go ahead, Michael.
Glenn paid himself because when we were the session was over, and they had to count the money to make sure it was all there because they had armed guards, and I guess $20 was missing.
Yeah, it was like $20.
Yeah.
And nobody said anything, and they said, "Okay, who's got the $20?" And I guess we waited around for an hour or two, because
they had to count the money when we were done tossing it in the air for the photo session.
Yeah, and then
what you're telling me that's real money?
Yeah, that's real money. It was
that was real American money in England on a Sunday.
Mm.
Yeah, they had to bring it. They had to ship it over in an airplane with guards on the airplane to bring it in. It's $250,000, $250,000 American dollars at the time, which at that time in 1973 was worth a lot of money. Still is a lot of money, but then it was worth a lot of money. But Glenn snagged the $20. Did he ever fess up, Dennis?
They thought he reached up in the light. There was a light fixture on the ceiling, and Glenn reached up and said, "Oh, it's up in here. It landed up in here." So he knew they were not going to give up till they found it. So he pretended that he found it up in the light.
Well, looking at Alice's set list, School's Out, I'm 18, Under My Wheels, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and $1 Billion Babies are the top 5 songs, most played 5 songs that he's ever had, and that's all from your era. So, I guess even when you're not out on the road, he's out on the road generating songwriting royalties for you.
That's true.
Well, but it's not like we're sitting around twiddling our thumbs or, getting all of the money while he's doing all the work. We have all kinds of things that we've been doing, and more power to him. I mean, I've been to concerts where I'm watching other people playing my songs, and not only playing my songs, I'm sitting in the audience and they're basically doing our show that we developed way back in the 70s. So, you got to look at it as a compliment in a way, but also, I look at that stage as our living room, and there's other people up there moving the furniture around.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you guys. So, catching up with Dennis, Michael, and Neal here at Noise 11. We've had many of Alice interview over the years. So it's good to see the brains behind the operation for a change.
Nice way to put it, Paul.
Oh,
wow.
boy.
Thanks for joining us here at Noise 11.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Nice talking to you. Hope to see
Thank you.